Yeah, so I think the profound opportunity with this GFRY comes from a couple of really sort of critical, maybe differentiating aspects of the design of this studio. I think, you know, the conscious interdisciplinary nature of it is particularly suitable for looking at public space, because public space is interdisciplinary. You know, we've all got our critical and different expectations. You know, from the people that instigate public space, you know, politicians or designers, you know, stakeholders, which, you know, we can elaborate on. We've all got particular incentives and motivators. We're in an era where public space is often incentivized by you know, its intersection with commercial opportunities. You know, we see that throughout the city. That's often what validates it or precipitates an action in public space, whether it's, you know, some extraordinary event like Lollapalooza that can only happen with you know, certain momentums. I suppose a cultural momentum that comes through a music-fueled movement of, you know, I don't know, I was going to say congregation of youth, but you know, popular music sort of transcends multi-generations right now. So, you know, so a happening like that is interdisciplinary, but motivated for the extraordinary revenues it can generate for the public realm. You know, one of the opportunities that the city affords itself is demanding or requiring an economic impact to allow these commercial entities and, you know, to allow rock and roll and to take over the city for a while.
I was looking at the history of PSO electricity, and it's the concept of it. It's pretty ancient. It's like, I think that since 3 times they have figured out that if you rub 2 sheets of or 2 pieces of ceramic, you can create like an electric charge. Yeah, and then like going back to the concept of tradition. I think tradition was like a modern invention to fight or to counteract the rapid changes of technology, right? That intangibility that progress gives you. And then I think that bringing those 2 things, or like bringing the history of that concept of PSO electricity into a more modern and technological way to define something or to explain something about tradition. It's that playfulness is kind of like interesting to me. I think what I get from here is like confidence that I can, confidence that I'm transmitting my idea, or that it has the potential to transmit my idea.
I'm working with a group of youth and through an informal class to reimagine, redesign a space in which they meet. So I'd say, as well as used by the little village or Boys and Girls Club. So that's a semi-public space. And through these conversations, we hope to kind of unveil agency that allows us to recreate the wilderness. And through this recreation of the space around them, it unveils this agency that we can be active participants in manifesting the world around us and manifesting new, not only physical possibilities but cultural possibilities, and that and through this diversity and multiplicity of voices and regional and cultural and identities are, I guess, very much in opposition to a kind of blanket mass, especially youth market, where there's kind of this homogenizing effect of like, oh wait, well, if people from the age of this age can get sold this kind of identity. What we're really trying to open up is that to create a diversity within this conversation. It's a much more complex thing than what's being pushed on us.
I think for me, what's most important is this idea of place and time and being present and doing things on a local level. And I think that has to do with my practice previous to being a grad student, but also something that kind of has been reiterated to me through speakers and presentations that we made, where it's like, what you do is and should be really influenced by the specifics of the location that you're working in. And so, for me, in the projects that I'm proposing with GFRY and actually doing in GFRY, I think I've been trying to do things that are done on like a very hyper-local scale and like beginning on a foundation of like relationships that are built and meaningful. And there's this quote that I like wrote down and highlighted and I just like love, and I keep thinking about it because Linda Twice-Smith writes about like Indigenous research, and she said that Indigenous research is a humble and humbling activity. And I really feel like that applies to my work as a community artist, because I think that's the approach that I like strive to have and want to have, is this like humble and humbling thing. But it's not about you going in, your like fam project and then leaving. It's about like spending the time to learn from others and then doing something together.
My entire thesis revolves around, I guess, sort of the individualism and the social isolation that we face from day to day living in Chicago. So the idea is to design programs or activities that people are invited to participate in, but at the same time, those activities should really invite people to have conversations.
So is this some kind of interactive element?
Well, yeah, my project specifically, it does involve interactive drawing surfaces that people can work on together. It involves sitting areas where people can sit, and has these moments of small design social experiments. So say I'm varying the orientation and the sizes of the benches. So at some places that are closer, at some places that are farther away. So you're creating all these, I guess, experimental and different conditions that people can interact with. And as designers, we can observe how people make use of the space and how it either enhances or discourages social conversations.
I'm I have been working on just learning how to kind of engage on the projects that everybody's working on.
Okay.
So my main focus wasn't to really develop one single object, but to kind of find a way to collaborate with everything.
Okay.
Like, so the tennis lake, it becomes like a one project.
Okay.
Not really like 12 different projects in one place.
Okay.
So my main focus was, I just saw a question on the board, so if there's a fire, what are you going to take? What's your main value?
Yes.
That would be harmony for me. So,
Okay.
I just think that Chicago as a city it's like a big, like an organic structure that functions all together, and they just function so well.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to kind of use Tennis Lake to represent how the city works in terms of like more micro scale.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically like the city that we live in, and we make different, each one of us make different footsteps every day, and we do different things every day.
Mm-hmm.
But everything as a whole, it just interests me that it becomes one city. It just, you know, everybody's just doing their work, but everything fits in.
Yeah.
So for our project to emphasize how we can keep our authenticity in each one of us,
Mm-hmm.
and still be united, and not really to look for uniformity, but to find unity among them.
I think one of the things that I'm really interested in is what my role as the artist is in engaging the communities with our community members with the community they live in. I think as my teaching practice, I've been doing that, but it's been through the role of the teacher, mm-hmm. and not necessarily the role of the artist. So I'm trying to break away from what I've defined within those four walls, right? And really being able to go out into the community again, not necessarily as a teacher, mm-hmm. but as an artist.
Okay.
That teaches.
So basically the idea is the concept of Easter eggs. Mm-hmm. If people are familiar with Easter eggs, it's hidden treats that are left for children and to be found on Easter, and it's kind of like a hidden surprise that you get. And that concept is also known in the technology world and like mm-hmm. programming and video games. Easter eggs are like hidden content that developers leave behind, basically as a treat for people who are playing the games or watching the movies to find. They add like a personal aspect when you find one. It kind of creates a connection to that game or that movie that otherwise you wouldn't have. So I'm trying to bring that aspect to the physical world through a series of design interventions. And they started off more as one-liner type ideas. Like an example would be a two-way mirror that people on one side are fixing their hair, and then on the other side people are laughing at the ones. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how it started off. And as time progressed, the ideas became more advanced, and I wanted to have something that was really awesome and fun, but if you were just to look at it quickly, it wouldn't appear to be anything. Uh-huh. So basically, by spending time in the space and interacting with it, it kind of unlocks these functions that you normally wouldn't get if you were just passing by.
Way more human. Well, there's something that they've advertised on TV recently in the commercials, and they'll talk about these great inventors who started in their garage. So everyone didn't start in a $1 million design studio with 4 or 5 assistants. They started in their garage, but they had vision, they had a dream, They had dedication, they had hard work, they believed in themselves, and they were able to share that dream with other people, so they believed in it. This is the same thing for GFRY Studio. We walked into kind of a blind situation. We've got this beautiful structure, and our goal is to try and figure out what you can do to try and breathe life into it, sight unseen. So we were kind of forced to walk with our faith. And that is really the key to what's going to make this work and what's going to make our philosophy work in the real world, is faith, blind faith, trust in each other, working as a team, getting your hands dirty, relinquishing control. As an arts educator, as an instructor, I've had to learn many times that if you're going to teach, you also have to stand back, allow your students to take the information and knowledge you've given them and process it. And not everyone's going to get an A or a B. Some aren't even going to come to class. But if you can get through to most of them, then they have the ability to take this concept and share it with others. And that's what I really thought this process was going to be. It's an opportunity for us to come together, work as a team, learn how to enhance public space, learn how to engage with other people, learn how to identify needs and fill them, and now take this out as advocates for social justice and share this with the world. If we accomplish that, we've done what I believe we've come here. Certainly I will feel that I've done what I came here to do, was to learn and then share the knowledge that I picked up in my years and instructors. So for me, having the license to create a film and podcasts and stills and share that, I now can continue doing what I do in my practice as an arts educator. I can share this information and this experience with whoever has access to a computer screen or an iPod or an iPhone or Gene Cisco, wherever we hear this. So it's been a great experience.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. I think it's very necessary to tell that story.
studio, and I read the flyer description for the studio. I knew exactly what, not exactly what I wanted to do, but like a general knowledge basically of that this site should be rehabilitated and adaptively reused. And I think the issue has come that I'm not an artist. I know exactly what I want. And I think for me to be able to incorporate something, it's been really hard because I've never had any limitations. Like with the building, there are some limitations, but I'm willing to unbrick the arches because that's not historical, but it's taken a lot longer for me to see what exactly my peers want to do. And so I've kind of been in this limbo with, I can work on the exterior all I want and, work on a restoration plan for the exterior, but what to actually incorporate into the building, I have no idea. And with some projects, I still have no idea. It's, halfway through March. So
my project is a weather adaptive canopy system that changes state based on in times of rain to gather rainwater into a water collection and circulation system, and it's in a different state during sunny weather. And it came out of an idea of it's the element of a project that I've thought of on a larger scale of thinking about how infrastructure and architecture can be adaptive to environment in different ways. So it's sort of it's illustrating, I want to be illustrating the principle of how our sort of built environment can accommodate changes in climate and weather, and to both use resources more effectively, harness resources, in this case it's harnessing the rainwater, and to sort of communicate to people, sort of create spatial gestures to communicate changing natural phenomena and sort of express that and be receptive and changing to that based on, to create different sorts of spaces based on what types of spaces we would need in different conditions.
So I think what really most urged me is the like 10 East Lake Street, the site itself is being abandoned, even though it's in a very busy urban place. And what I really cares about is there are many resources out there not being well used, so the system was not well designed. Then those leftover resources, or some might even just simply wasted resource. For instance, like the trash we throw from our daily life. Those places could be reused in a very good purpose, and people just don't see them, and they just really don't think about it.
Okay.
In a way, that reflects back to 10 East Lake Street. The site was there with lack of care, and we see Jeffrey, of course, myself, we see the great potential of it. We see the great future for it. So we want to show the public what's the potential of 10 East Lake Street. So particularly for me, what interest is to make the 10 East Lake Street visible, because many sites like those, what I mentioned, those resources that not being used are invisible. That's why people don't make connection, people don't care about it. So I'll be working with light installation and projection on site, and potentially maybe developing a program for the 10 East Lake Street, later for educational hub, for providing resource or information for the general public. So try to make this kind of connection, that people know what kind of things actually are there for them that they can use.
So I'm interested in the design process and the pedagogy of design. So what I see in the GFRY, the possibility of forming this project is to take our experience and try to bring some of the things that could happen to make a more successful design process, like an emphasis on research. I think it's very important to also bring a more more focused to community participation and working with the communities. We're talking about community engagement and the thing that Erika brought together, just like this idea that in order to do historic preservation and restoration, you need to involve the participation of the. So I'm looking at all these parts that make a design process that are currently not part of it. Like most of the design processes begin with an idea, let's do some research, then we have some ideation, brainstorming, and there's a lot of emphasis in design, pedagogy in that second part of the process. Like most design students go through class when they're given a problem defined, and they basically have the solution. And there's a lot of emphasis placed there, great ideas, beautiful designs, but not really a lot of training on how to be empathetic with the situation, how to do research. We almost see that almost as something that is bothersome, that we have to all do research, right? We have to find out on the side of the issues in the place. And what I learned in this class, and what I'm learning from some of my peers, is the need to place more emphasis that down to earth, one-on-one, very localized contextual engagement.
For me, I am really interested in the role of the designer, particularly as a mediator between stakeholders here in the loop, because I think that something that was exciting and really unusual about our site at Tenny's Lake is how many people think that it's an important site. You've got so many really powerful stakeholders that want to say in the action, and yet it's otherwise kind of rather vacant and sort of abandoned looking.
Yeah.
But it's really different from a typical abandoned site in a different neighborhood. So I think in this unusual situation, the architect and the designer sort of have sort of a responsibility to start the conversation in a different way, and participatory design that doesn't stop between, designer and sort of typical user, but actually goes both ways from the typical user, the participant that might occupy an outdoor park, for example, and a CEO of a hotel. So it's sort of an extra end of the spectrum that I don't think you see in a lot of abandoned sites. And so that was really what was really inspiring to me in terms of processes.
I would say it's about the potential of design, not so much as an object-oriented discipline, more like a translator between disciplines. It's more about like how do we communicate with other people who are not in the design field. Like, how do you communicate with art educators, or how do you communicate with administrators, or like financial people? Like, how do you involve basically stakeholders? And I think for me, it's become like those ways of trying to find a common ground and try to everybody get on board, like with different goals, but all of them going towards a single goal. And that's where I think design has potential to become like this tool, or to become this facilitator between discourses.
Okay, so I've approached it in terms of project management in a lot of ways, but I've also stopped short of telling everybody what to do. I mean, I know I tell everybody what to do a lot, but I think that I could have done more. And I sort of stopped myself because I wanted it to be an organic process. So at the beginning, everyone was really somewhat maybe excited for like a week, and then everyone got really mad that it wasn't what they wanted it to be. And so one thing that I've learned, I was just thinking about this, with project management, is managing not just people, but their expectations. And that's something that, I don't know, I think that at this point I'm looking back and I feel very positive about where we are right now, specifically in the last like 2 or 3 weeks. I think that a lot of great stuff has been happening, but I'm still looking back and I'm like, well, how did we get to this place? Because a month ago it didn't feel good. the month before that didn't feel super good either. And sometimes when we get feedback from people, it still doesn't feel good. Like I feel like certain people within the class are just not happy with how the process has happened. But I still feel like we're at a good place. So I'm wondering how you get to that place where you're happy with the process. You're not happy with the process, but you're happy with the outcome. And can we sort of look back and respect that the process happened?
Studio was this incredible opportunity at the School of the Art Institute for people from all design and art disciplines and backgrounds, right? To come together and to work together, ideally, to propose solutions to real problems in the world. That can't get more exciting than that, right? So that's a very exciting opportunity. I think design pedagogy is really critical to the future of understanding complicated world problems. I think that we have a lot of tools with design research and design pedagogy in terms of participatory processes. I think we can also grow in terms of new understanding of research. Some of the students in the GFRY particularly looked at pedagogy and looked at design research and participatory methods. And one of the things we found is a lot of times things are coming with the design problem already framed and perhaps even the consensus of the group before the design problem starts, so that the consensus process, the participatory process, is about defining the consensus, right? And so I think one of the things we've learned is that if we're going to really look at the systematics of designing, we've got to go way before we involve people in the process. Because if we involve people in the process, before we understand what the problem is ourselves, or what the limitations are, or what the existing resources are, we're going to redesign for current contexts. We're not going to design real solutions to current contexts, right? So one of the things I think we're learning is who gets to decide the research question, and is the research question designed before the studio starts or during the process of the studio trying to understand kind of a new realm to understand before we can design for it, right? So at what point, if we can imagine new participatory design processes, we're actually looking at the GFRY having contributed, right, to adding on a whole segment of process to the existing, what we're calling the participatory design process. That's really big, right? That's really great. So that process could be beneficial to the field, right? It could be beneficial to the School of the Art Institute, to AIABO, to other places in the school where social engagement and participatory practices are looked at. As well, it has, I think, applications in K through college learning in design education. So I think those are exciting moments.